$45,000. That is a realistic tail coverage bill for a 3-year emergency medicine position. And if your contract does not specifically address who pays, that bill lands on you, even if your employer terminates you without cause. This is not a hypothetical risk. It is one of the most financially consequential provisions in your employment agreement, and it is buried in insurance language most physicians skim past. Malpractice insurance comes in two fundamental structures. Occurrence policies cover any incident that happens during your employment period, regardless of when the lawsuit gets filed. If you treat a patient in year 2 and get sued in year 5 after you have left, the occurrence policy still covers you. No gap, no tail needed. Claims-made policies work differently. They only cover claims filed while the policy is active. Same scenario, patient in year 2, lawsuit filed in year 5 after you have left. The claims-made policy expired when your employment ended. You have no coverage. The reality: the vast majority of emergency medicine positions use claims-made policies. They are cheaper for employers up front, which means the coverage gap problem falls on you by default, unless you address it in the contract. Medical malpractice claims surface years after the incident. Patients frequently have 2 to 3 years to file. Pediatric cases can extend significantly longer. Tail coverage, technically called an extended reporting period endorsement, closes that gap by extending your claims-made policy to cover lawsuits filed after you leave for incidents that occurred during your employment. For a typical 3-year EM employment period, tail coverage runs $30,000 to $60,000. This is not an annual premium. It is a lump sum due when you leave, at the worst possible moment, when you are transitioning jobs, potentially relocating, possibly without income. If your contract is silent on tail coverage, assume you are responsible. Some contracts explicitly state the physician is responsible. Others simply do not mention it, which achieves the same result. There is an alternative called nose coverage, or prior acts coverage. Instead of extending your old policy forward, your new employer's policy covers your prior work. Nose coverage is typically less expensive. The limitation? It only works if you are moving to another position with a willing employer. 4 specific contract provisions protect you from the tail coverage trap. First, employer-paid tail on termination without cause. If your employer ends your contract for reasons unrelated to your performance, they should pay the tail. You did not choose to leave. Second, employer-paid tail on non-renewal. Many EM contracts auto-renew annually. If the employer chooses not to renew, that is functionally a termination without cause. The same logic applies. Third, prorated tail provisions. After 1 year, perhaps 20% employer paid. After 5 years, perhaps full coverage. This rewards tenure and reduces your exposure over time. Fourth, tail coverage addressed in practice sale or group change scenarios. If your employer gets acquired or loses the hospital contract, strong contracts address this explicitly. The revenue context matters. On a 99-285, your highest level emergency department visit, the CMS work relative value unit structure includes a malpractice component within the total relative value unit calculation. That malpractice-related revenue flows to your group or employer throughout your employment. Asking them to fund tail coverage is not unreasonable. It is asking them to apply that revenue to its intended purpose. Watch for these red flags: silence on tail coverage, physician-responsible language regardless of how the termination occurs, vague provisions about negotiating tail at the time of departure, and short vesting periods for employer-paid tail. Tail coverage can cost $30,000 to $60,000. The time to address it is before you sign, not on the way out the door. Run your contract through the ClauseLine analyzer at clauseline.com/analyzer.